What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. So, I wanted to talk about something today. I wanted to talk about guitar tone. Imagine that. Big shocker. But more so, I wanted to talk about finding your own guitar tone, right? And how to get there. This is something I see guitar players talking about all the time, right? And the tone quest is never ending, right? Like, we're always looking for the next thing, that's going to make our tone better, right? And sometimes that can be kind of a never-ending rabbit hole, and you can definitely tweak yourself out of a good tone. I think we've all been guilty of that to some degree, right? So, if you're a newer player, and you are, especially if you're like really starting to get into being in a band and like playing shows and stuff, you might just have the gear that you have, right? Say you're young, you have one guitar, maybe you have one amp, right? And you kind of don't know where to go tone-wise. Maybe you think like, man, my guitar sounds fine, but it doesn't sound like the records I hear and the bands that I'm into and all that kind of stuff, right? And you don't really know where to go. So I'm 36 years old, and I've been playing in bands for 21 years. I started playing in bands when I was 15 years old. Might have been 14. I can't really remember. It was a long time ago. But I've been in bands a long time, and I've been on a huge journey with my guitar tone. And there were a couple of like real kind of pivotal, what is wrong with me today? Pivotal points in that journey where I felt like I actually made some really big leaps, in the right direction with my guitar tone. So, how to get started? I wish there was an easy way, right? To say, do this and you'll have the tone you want. And that could be the whole video. We're 3 minutes in and be over, right? But there just isn't. There isn't an easy way to just say, do this and then you have the tone you want, right? The thing I can save you a lot of time with is chase the tone that's in your head. What does that mean, right? When I first got started out, I just knew that like I had this little combo amp, and it didn't sound like the stuff I heard or saw, right? And I noticed one day I was watching a bunch of music videos on a DVD. That's how old I am. I had a DVD with a bunch of music videos on it. And I noticed that all of the bands that I liked were playing like the same amps. And I was like, well, I just got to find one of those amps, and then I can sound like that, right? If only it were that easy. Not too long after that, I did have the fortune of coming across the amp in question. The amp in question was a PV-5150, right? So I'm 16 years old or something like that, and I've been playing in a band with my friends, and I have this guitar amp that's like my dad's old amp from the 70s, and, it sounded fine, but it didn't sound like the kind of stuff I was wanting to play, and I couldn't get that sound out of it, right? And I remember seeing all these music videos and seeing all these bands. They had like a PV-5150 and like a Marshall 412 cabinet. That's like what I saw every band back then in like the hardcore, metalcore kind of scene. That's just what everybody was playing. And I thought, well, if I can find one of those, I'll be good to go. And then, lo and behold, I actually came across one and was fortunate enough to be able to acquire it. Because back then, everything wasn't insanely expensive. My dad was actually able to get it for a pretty good deal. So I had the amp, but I still couldn't get it to sound the way I wanted it to sound, right? I'm just plugging it into my amp, and I'm turning the gain up, I'm getting feedback and all this stuff and everything. And it took me playing shows and kind of learning along the way, I need a noise gate pedal to keep my amp from feeding back. Or how do you get it to sound so tight? I need an overdrive pedal for that, right? It took a while to get there. But I was also just kind of aimlessly chasing like other people's guitar tone, right? So this brings me back to the chase the tone that's in your head thing. it's like I had this grand revelation one day, years later. You know, I've been in plenty of bands and I've toured and everything, and I'm in my 20s, and I just woke up one day and was like, I just had this revelation. When I hear guitar in my head, like if I'm at work or I'm walking around in the park or sitting in my house or something, and Les Pauls, they're butt heavy. They do that. You gotta hold on to them. So I noticed though that like there was a guitar tone in my head. Like when I would hear a guitar lick in my head, you know, for like my band, like I was gonna write a new song or something, I realized that I wasn't just hearing some like clean, plinky guitar tone. I realized that the riffs and the chords I was hearing in my head when I was thinking about writing music had a tone to them. And that was just like a huge revelation for me. That blew my mind. I was like, I can't believe I've never realized this before. That like, I think in a guitar tone. And that really got me wondering. I was like, okay, so now I have to find a record that has a guitar tone that's close to that. So I just started listening to records. And I wasn't listening for someone else's guitar tone. I was listening for my guitar tone. And I found it. And when I found it, I became obsessed with that record, and I became obsessed with that guitar player and his gear, because I thought, okay, well, I can just get that stuff and then I'll have this guitar tone, right? So kind of linear thinking. It's like the same thinking but different, right? Like I was still chasing after someone else's gear and someone else's tone, kind of, but not really. It's weird, right? But it kind of worked. The record was Sempiternal by Bring Me the Horizon. I heard that guitar tone and I went, that's it. That's the guitar tone, or very close to the guitar tone I think in. And lo and behold, what was he using? He was using Les Pauls and Marshalls on that record, which is kind of funny because I had been through dozens and dozens of different guitars and pickup combinations and amps and everything else. And I'd had a Les Paul, and I had kind of gone down this like Ibanez ESP rabbit hole with EMGs and stuff and everything. And I wound up coming back full circle to my Les Paul with like a real hot passive pickup in it and a Marshall. And that's kind of where I've been ever since. But I figured out that none of that stuff's really all that unique, and that I could actually kind of pull that guitar tone out of just about any rig or situation I was in. And so that came from, I was thinking back about a friend that I have who used to be in a punk band, and it always seemed to me like anytime we would play shows with his band back in the day, he would just hit somebody up and be like, hey man, I got my guitar, can I just borrow an amp? And I was like, sure, you can borrow mine, or he'd borrow somebody else. It's just like he never brought his own amp to shows for some reason. And it never mattered. He just like always sounded like him. And I remember kind of thinking back on conversations with him, because he had a gold top Les Paul with P90s in it. And that's all he ever brought. He didn't have any pedals or nothing. He just brought that guitar and a cord to gigs and just borrowed someone's amp. And he always got the tone that sounded like him. And I was like, if he can do that, so can I. Like, I should be able to get the guitar tone I want out of just about, within parameters, right? Obviously, a Telecaster and a Fender Twin aren't going to get you like a real heavy metalcore guitar tone, right? So within practicality, I could get that tone out of any rig. I just had to learn what the knobs on the amp actually do, right? I had to kind of learn how to find that tone on an amp or on an amp model or anything like that, right? So I've kind of evolved to the point now to where I don't really care what I play through that much. I have an idea. Obviously, there are things that achieve that quicker than other things, right? For example, if I plug into like an Orange or a Marshall, I can just dial it in instantly. You know, if I plug in through like a 5150 or like a Mesa Boogie or something like that, it's a little harder for me to kind of find it, but it's there. I can find it. You know, within, let's say within 5%, I can find it, right? So I'm not as much of a gear stickler as I used to be when it comes to like amps and pedals and stuff. What I've found in the opposite direction that I have become very much a stickler about is my guitars. And that's because that's just what I'm like holding and feeling. It's like a very tactile thing. And I've been playing so long, I have a lot of muscle memory. Like I have to have a pickup switch up here. If I play a guitar where the switch is somewhere different, I'll be in the middle of the song and I'll be in the middle of the song and I'll do like this and nothing will happen because there's no switch there. Like my muscle memory is just built around playing Les Pauls because I've been playing them so long. And I just prefer like the scale length and the fretboard radius, you know, because it's such a tactile thing. It's what you're touching the whole time. So I've become sort of particular about the guitars I play. But when it comes to like amps and pedals and stuff, not really. You know, I can get the tone I want out of a modeler. I can get the tone I want out of a Marshall or like I said, just about anything that I am going to come across. You know, if I'm in any kind of situation where like, oh, I'm having to use someone else's gear, you know, or whatever it might be. Like as long as I have a Les Paul-ish style guitar, right, with, you know, 2 humbuckers, 2 volume knobs, switch up here, like I'm pretty good to go. So how does that help you find your guitar tone? Don't be afraid to just try stuff. And you're going to see a lot of opinions on YouTube about like, oh, you should get this, or this is the best thing for this, or this is the best thing for that. And I mean, sure, you know, like I said earlier, there are easier ways to get to the destination. Like if you want to play really heavy music, you know, an amp designed for that is going to get you there. A guitar built around that's going to get you there a lot quicker than something else. But that doesn't mean you can't get there with what you have. Or with something a little unconventional, right? Like I said, I went through tons of stuff. I tried all kinds of things. And yeah, that costs a lot of money. And I understand not everybody has the luxury to do that. And that's what, you know, that's why people like stuff like YouTube and Instagram, TikTok, all that kind of stuff. Because, you know, you can kind of get an idea from like listening to and watching other people talk about stuff. And maybe you can cut some of those steps out and avoid some of the stuff you know is not going to work for you. But don't be afraid to try stuff though, because you might come across something that you never expected you would like that you do like. You know, so don't be afraid. You know, you might think, I don't know, man, maybe an ESP is not for me, maybe a Fender is not for me, but try them, you know. I'm not saying keep them forever. I'm not saying even go buy one. But if you have the ability to, if you have a friend that has one or a music store where you can try some things out, don't be afraid to try out new stuff and try to find that tone that's in your head on a wide variety of gear, whether, you know, amps, guitars, whatever. Because if you can zero in on that tone that you think in, then the gear sort of becomes secondary. And you find yourself not, you know, in a bind quite as much. You know, I've been at shows before where like I turned my amp on and it went and all the lights cut off, you know. And then you're hey man, can my amp just died? Can I borrow someone's amp? And someone's like, sure, but I have this, you know, whatever, completely opposite thing that you're used to using, right? And so if you can kind of zero in on that tone that's in your head, that can help you, you know, in certain situations like that. One of the things I actually would recommend for younger players or newer players getting into this is find an amp modeler. That's a really good way. It's not a one-for-one comparison, right? Like the Mesa Boogie model on like your amp modeler isn't going to sound like every Mesa Boogie amp you come across, right? It's just not. It's kind of a generic amalgamation of the Mesa sound, right? Or the PV sound or the Marshall sound or whatever it is, right? But it's kind of a good way for you to test out a whole lot of stuff without actually having to test out a whole lot of stuff, right? Like back before modelers were really any good, I had to just go through a bunch of amps. And that was expensive. But with plugins, amp modelers, that kind of stuff, you can explore a huge variety of tones and kind of find what best works for you. And amp modeling's gotten so great these days. Like, everything sounds so good. So I don't really feel like you're missing out on anything by having an amp modeler, as opposed to having a bunch of tube amps, you know, stacked up around your house or whatever. So I used to have a bunch of big amps, and I have one now. I have I have two. I take that back. I have two. One of them I forget about because it's not even in my studio. It's in my spare bedroom, and I never even look at it or see it or anything. It's just in there. But yeah, you know, maybe that'll help you on your tone journey. Kind of sit down and think about the guitar tone that you think in. When you hear stuff in your head, what guitar tone are you hearing? Especially for those of you that write music. You know, now if you're thinking about Led Zeppelin or Black Sabbath or, you know, Killswitch Engage or whoever it might be, right? You're probably thinking about their music in the context of their guitar tone. But if you write your own music, that riff that you're thinking of in your head has a guitar tone to it. So start picking it apart and seeing what kind of tone it is. Is it big and fat? Is it like tight and percussive? You know, is it clean and sparkly? Like, whatever it might be. So be aware of the guitar tone that you think in, and try, and like, I do think what I did was a good kind of route to take. Once you figure out what that tone is, start listening to some different bands and records and trying to find something that already exists that's very close to that tone in your head. Then you can start to seek out the stuff that will help you get there. So that's this week's video. Kind of a little different, but it's just something I was thinking about over the past few days that I kind of wanted to just make a video about, because that's what I do. If you guys like this kind of stuff, if this is your first video, check out my other videos. I do like gear demos, and I do a lot of this kind of stuff too, just talking about guitars and guitar tone and stuff like that, because I'm a nerd and I dig doing this, and chances are if you're watching this video, you do too. So if you like this kind of stuff, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel. I'm only 20 subscribers away from 500 subscribers, which would be super cool to hit that. I know that's not like a big number or anything, but it'd be cool for me. So if you're watching this and you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. And I'll be back soon with some more guitar knowledge. Thanks.